thank you so much for joining me for a few minutes to talk about Aztec Batman, Clash of Titans. You are the composer for the film. Tell me a little bit about your work on it because I mean this is a huge project. I personally, for me, I know it was for Warner Brothers and so many people because it's really blending the pop culture of my favorite superhero, which is Batman, and then also my culture, which is the Aztecs.
Exactly, man. My culture as well. So it's super exciting. When they first called me, I was very intimidated, thinking, wow, this is a lot of pressure. First of all, Batman is such an important, iconic piece of pop culture, not only in this country, but around the world. Um, and musically, I've always loved, the Batman '89, the Tim Burton film. To me, like that set the sound and music for Batman. Like, to me, that's the true theme of Batman. I always loved that. So here I was presented an opportunity to try to reinvent the sound of Batman, and I felt this sort of like immense pressure and responsibility, thinking like, how can I do this? Do I have a right to do this? And then I realized that Aztec blood is literally running through my veins. My parents are both from Mexico, although I was born in Los Angeles. You know, this is who I am, and there's really no wrong I could do. Because this is truly me. So yeah, it was such a tremendous honor to be involved with this and write this new music. It was so cool. I eventually felt right at home doing it, and I'm really proud of the stuff we were able to make for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, just wanted to deep dive a little bit on that particular note. You talked about loving the '89, and that really set the foundation for Batman sound. We saw it carry over to the animated series, and to this day, we see it. Really, the inspiration behind even as late as the Justice League, they brought it back because it was so iconic, and it still is kind of the signature sound. And we know superheroes usually have signature sound. We know what Donner's Superman sounds like, which is still now the similar sound that we hear with James Gunn's version. So where do you start? Where do you find your foundation for this version of Batman in order to make it a little bit relatable, similar, not similar. That's not the word I'm looking for. Relatable or in that same, I guess, sandbox, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it, and still make it unique and really stand on its own for this version.
Okay, so starting with this is a sort of a reimagining of the Batman mythology, reset to Aztec times. So this is the early 1500s when Cortez is arriving, discovering the new world. Um, it was important to sort of be true to what was the sound? What were the instruments that Aztec people were playing? I did a lot of research, of course. It's difficult because there's not much musical record as far
Hmm.
as like what the music sounded like. There's like we all have interpretations of it, but at least we know what the instruments are. And so I was able to find and track down these sort of things. I even built certain instruments myself. Things like things with difficult names to pronounce, like Huetls, which are these sort of like tree trunk drums, teponaxles, which are these sort of like cylindrical things that you hit. And of course, like there was these Aztec dancers called concheros that wore seashells around their legs and all that. So I was able to get that sort of stuff and even dance and record myself and other people to capture certain rhythms, right? And so the music is not Mexican; it's pre-Mexican music, pre-Hispanic music. So it's very tribal, very rhythmic, um, and so a lot of the score was built around sort of these primal, primitive rhythms, a lot of rhythm-based stuff. But like you were saying, um, the stuff that was created by Danny Elfman on Batman '89, and also Shirley Walker on Batman the Animated Series, gave Batman a certain sort of like grand gothic orchestral sound. So my idea was, how do we combine those two things together? And that's what I tried to do. So much, in fact, that I really felt that the melody that Danny Elfman came up with for Batman, the was so important. I wanted to incorporate it into the score. And I remember a few years back, I was with Danny Elfman and I was talking to him about Justice League, just what you were talking about a minute ago. Um, I said, hey, you know, you did the music for this film, and I noticed that you used John Williams' Superman theme in Justice League. And I said, why did you do that? And he said, you know, to me, uh, that melody that John Williams wrote is as important as the red tights and the cape, you know. And I kind of felt the same way. So I wrote him a letter um, last year when I was working on the score, sort of explaining like, look, there's this sort of key moment in the film where there's a certain reveal, and I'd love to use just those 5 notes of your melody. And this sort of long thing, and he just wrote back one sentence saying, "Sounds awesome, do it." So that was great. And the next step was sort of to talk to Warner Brothers and convince them that it was okay. And somehow it was still like a legal, complicated issue, but we were able to do it. So we were able to use the Elfman's theme in addition to sort of creating this sort of grand orchestral goth sounding thing and the tribal rhythmic um, elements that I wanted to incorporate. So we had all that, and then on top of all that, another element we wanted to include was, so this is what happens. We have Cortez arriving, and he's bringing things that have never been seen in the Americas. I'm talking gunpowder and like armor and things, and even horses, things that were not here. So we wanted the music to take a change where it became even shocking where you hear electric guitars, you know, like actual like metal drums and stuff like that. So the score itself starts evolving towards those battles later in the thing. It sounds like a heavy metal band playing throughout the whole thing. So that was sort of the idea. All these things we wanted to put in there. It's very it was a lot. It was a lot of stuff. And of course, I always felt like, is this the right thing to do? Are we doing this correctly? And like I said earlier, like I am an Aztec as well. You know, this is what's running through my blood, and it has to be right. So I just had to believe, trust my gut, and go for it. You know what I mean?
Now, let's stay on that topic. I wanted to ask you about the director, but first of all, what did it mean to you personally to be able to work on this? And like you said, do the research, and even you say you're making instruments, you're listening to instruments maybe for the first time, you're mixing these sounds. What does that mean to you? With it being your culture, to be able to do such a deep dive, and what did you take away from it?
Man, it's you know, I was born and raised in East Los Angeles here, and growing up, the idea of doing music for movies or TV or whatever, like all that seemed like such a foreign world. Like Hollywood, even though it was 20 minutes off the 101 freeway there, it may as well have been another planet. I had no entry into that world. And this is all pre-internet, and bless my parents, you know, they were great, you know, they raised me really well, but the ceiling for our people was like, hey, one day you'll take over the dry cleaners and you'll be the manager of the cleaners and this will be what you do. You know, I didn't go to college either. You know, the expectation after high school was like, you get a job, you start working, and you know, help pay the rent and pay bills. um so you know, our ceiling was right here. There was expectation of being successful at music was not a thing. And so for me, like coming from East LA, I still feel like that kid that's just trying to make stuff happen. You know, like I worked a regular day job all my 20s into my 30s, and I finally made stuff happen for myself in my 30s, like in doing music for TV and cartoons. Um, so it I don't take it lightly. I don't take it for granted being where I'm from and being able to get a job like this and be like, I'm working on fucking Batman here. You know, it's like this is crazy. It means a lot to me, man. It makes me emotional thinking about it for sure. And the same is true for the director Juan Meza Leon. You know, it's like we both feel like we're just kids still, you know, just admiring this stuff, like going to the movies to see Tim Burton Batman movies, and just like next thing you know, we're a kind of part of it. It's pretty cool. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I've been following this film now for a while now, because I mean, we got a chance to chat with the director back in, it was a New York Comic Con last year, and then again San Diego, and it was just like, I'm just ready for it to come out. Luckily by then they're screeners, and I've seen it a couple of times, and it's fun. It's so much fun because I think the mythos of our culture sometimes is just watered down by Hollywood often,
Yeah.
and because it's not the right people working on them. And I felt like in this project, they had a great collaboration with Mexican artists. I mean, people like you who understand maybe a little bit more both sides of it, because I mean, me too, I was born here, but my dad's Mexican, and we we appreciate our roots.
Absolutely, man. But at the same time, we're trying to be, I'm trying to be respectful and reverent of the culture. You know, I did grow up with punk rock and heavy metal, where I love stuff that broke the rules. And I love artists that just didn't know how to play music and tried making music anyway. Like I've always admired that people that sort of, you have to have like reverence, but also irreverence for art and music. So that's what allowed me to combine tribal Aztec drumming with electric guitars, and doing these things that maybe shouldn't work, but we try to make them work and combine things that shouldn't be combined. You still have to take risks and not be afraid to break things. You can't be so precious about what you're doing. You got to put a lot of love and care, but don't be precious about it.
No, but I mean, like Mexican music culture has such a great history in rock and ska, and
Right.
in so much music that a lot of people really just oftentimes just refer to a lot of bands that are maybe are over in Europe. But no, I mean, if you look at the history of what we've done here with Jaguares, with Maná, with Caifanes, I mean, there's so many,
Oh yeah.
and you just I think it's underappreciated too, because it's like, oh no, no, we had a really 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 big influence on a lot of music, especially in the 80s and 90s when it comes to rock and ska and music like that.
Yeah. Did you ever hear Nortec Collective? Those guys?
No,
Those guys were combining like norteñas with like dance and like electronic stuff. It's really cool, interesting stuff. You got to hear it.
I'm gonna have to check it out. Now, I noticed that you also you work on a lot of animated projects. What is your process for animated shows? Because a lot of times, like SpongeBob is really wacky. I mean, you've done stuff for Cuphead, and now you're working on Aztec Batman. Where do you start with animated projects? Because a lot of times they have very very unique sounds that aren't necessarily on any radar.
It's a great question because in a lot of ways I've sort of like been pigeonholed into being like like the weird quirky cartoon guy doing, like I said, SpongeBob, Patrick Star and Cuphead and all that stuff. But Batman, Aztec Batman was a whole departure because it's dramatic. Juan Mezalion, the director, was like, I want this to be cinematic and serious. And the first passes that I made at the music were maybe a little too playful, and he was like, that's cool, but let's try again. Let's try again. And we did. We tried reapproaching the music, and it got a lot darker, a lot kind of dissonant, a little more weird and like abrasive. So this film for me was very different than anything I've done before in cartoons. The rules that I learned back for cartoons didn't apply to this. We were just doing things that were a lot more different. And I think for me, it's interesting because maybe it'll open some doors to do more work like this, cinematic stuff, feature films, hopefully. But yeah, I've always been short attention span. I love SpongeBob. I like working, 11 minutes long and like 30 ideas within those 11 minutes. So you go from like playful Hawaiian music into like, a heavy metal thing. And then all of a sudden like a polka chase and then back into Hawaiian music. It's like I really love that kind of thing, but this was different. This is a whole other animal for sure. Very challenging for sure.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, like you're saying, a little bit more serious versus
Yeah.
that chaos that can,
Oh,
you could there's almost no rules, just whatever sounds really good at that moment. Could
totally.
even be squeaky shoes. I don't know.
Right.
Um, so I do want to ask you what has been your takeaway from working on this project that you'll carry over to future projects?
You know, First thing is that I feel like it's one of the first times in my career where, who I am and where I'm from actually played a role in the work I was doing. You know, um, it's just the first time that I was called upon because of who I am and my roots, which was great. It's not that I was avoiding that before, but it never really happened until now. Everything I've done has been just these, like I said, these crazy cartoons. So this is like has a really special place in my heart. I feel like, and it's already happened. I've talked to young fans and people with the same color skin as myself that, you know, all of a sudden feel like, yeah, maybe they could do the same thing. Maybe they could make cartoons. Maybe they could do music. It's wonderful because I feel like I didn't have that. I didn't have anyone that I could reach up to or talk to, like when I was trying to make it happen and when I was a teenager or in my 20s. Um, I didn't have, and everyone I looked up to were these amazing composers, but there were these white guys, in Hollywood that weren't going to pick up the phone if I called them to get advice. Um, and No, but here we are, and I think it's just it's again, it's a lot more personal to me. This project, I think I'll never be able to have another experience like this. It was just truly special. It's super close to my heart, and yeah, and Warner Bros. Was nice enough to let us have a soundtrack coming out. So that's going to be out on Spotify and all the streamers pretty soon, maybe in a week or two. So yeah, it's cool, man.
Oh, that's exciting. I would love to have that on in the background in my office as I'm working.
Good, good.
Especially because in my home office I have a Batman the animated series of just it's like literally about this wide,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's signed by Kevin Conroy. I got to meet him,
yeah.
and so it'd be a cool ambiance because your soundtrack I think is great.
Thanks.
On that same note, I did want to ask you, it's funny. I love when conversations when we can vibe in a way where you lead me into my next question anyway. So thank you for doing that. So I mean, I grew up with my dad working all kinds of crazy hours, my mom cleaning houses, and yeah, sometimes you're kind of looking for that figure to guide you onto what you want to do. I've always felt that for my daughter and then her friends and then just people in the community to tell them that they can do anything they want. Heck, I cannot look at myself and tell even 18-year-old me that I'm going to be a TV producer and an interviewer for a pop culture website, and that's insane. He wouldn't believe me. And you've carved your own path,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
here you are now as a composer. You're working on a character like you said, a series, and as important, probably the most popular. I mean, arguably, maybe after Superman, if not the top superhero in the world. What advice do you have for up and coming young composers, artists? I mean, anyone really in the arts that really wants to make it in an industry as hard as it is in Hollywood.
You have to be very persistent, consistent, and at the same time always be kind and a good person. Like it's okay to reach out to people and you know, there's a way to, you know, be persistent with reaching out to someone, but also be kind the whole time. I'm polite and courteous. I've written to people 3 or 4 times if they haven't replied. And, I there's like a there's a way to do this where you're not a jerk. That's number one. I I think you can never give up. You have to just like I know that even if I had a day job, working in an office in a cubicle, I would still be making music to this day. Every day at night, I'd come home and be composing. I'd be playing in bands, putting stuff on SoundCloud, no matter what. And also, reach out to people that you admire or are looking up to, and reach out to me. Like you could actually go to my website and just write to me. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Like I feel like it's my duty now to be there for people that are because I didn't have that. I need if anyone has a question, like if you want me to hear your music, send it to me. I'll be happy to just tell you what I think, or just if you need some advice on something, don't be afraid to reach out. Not just to me, but anybody really. Hopefully, if you're reaching out to the right people that are kind and considerate, they will take the time of their day to write back to you. And again, I get busy too, and I tell people like, don't. It's okay to write to me 2 or 3 times. I'll get back to you. You know, but persistence is important. Like not giving up. I know the industry's crazy and opportunities aren't always there, but you have to love what you're doing enough that you're going to do it anyway. Like, even if it's just for someone's podcast, even if it's just for like a web, a web cartoon or something that someone made for free in college, like do music for that project. Do music for any little thing, you could find. And get your stuff out there, build a body of work little by little. Before you know it, you have like 30 credits that you didn't even realize happened. And then people could reference that and be like, oh, wow, this guy's done this and this and that. It's pretty cool. He seems responsible. Oh, that's another thing. Be deliver. Know how to deliver on time. You know, I work on these productions, and people think, oh, you have to wait for inspiration to come from above, and God's got to talk to me. But that's not the case. When something's due on Friday, and it's like a multi-million-dollar production, you better turn that shit in right on time on Friday because everyone's depending on you. So you could be a crazy artist, but you have to be responsible enough to know how to meet deadlines, be someone that's easy to communicate with, and be just friendly. If you're going to work on a series, you're going to be with someone for 15 months. You better be able to be fun to hang out with and go get a drink with, because otherwise, what's the point? They're not going to want to work with you. So all those things I just said are definitely important for sure. What do you think? Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. I have a job where if I don't meet my deadline, the show's gonna go on anyway. So,
Without, you know,
so if it's gonna if the TVs are gonna be black, that's gonna be on on my deadline. That's always funny.
yeah.
Uh, Ego, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me. It means a lot to get to talk to you, to get to know you, and to talk about your process for Aztec Batman.